Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be discussing my top 5 tips for planning a Universal vacation, and I'm going to answer your questions that you sent me about Universal. Hi! You might notice that this is a different outfit than what I was just wearing in that intro, and that is because I have some news I need to tell before I get into the rest of this Universal tips video. Tomorrow, Saturday, May 11th, we are leaving on a trip to Florida. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll get a little peek into what we're doing. We're spending 4.5 days in the Florida Keys. There might be some special guests, aka my parents, involved in that. We've got a really fun day at Disney planned, and then MegaCon with Brittany and Jordan. Brittany and I are cosplaying again. You'll have to wait to see those vlogs or on Instagram to see who I'm cosplaying as. Information for my Instagram account is down below if you want to follow along. It's just DiscoLiz. So I hope you will join us for that. But without further ado, here are my top 5 tips for visiting Universal Orlando. So if this is your first time on my channel, hi, I'm Liz. I'm originally from Florida, grew up in Florida. Now I'm living in Texas with my fiance and our 3 dogs. I make home vlogs on Mondays, and then on Fridays, I usually cover something travel related and typically the Orlando theme parks. So I visited Universal Studios Florida for the first time when I was in 1st grade, and I will insert some pictures of my parents and I during our very first visit back right after it opened. I want to say this was 1991 or so. So I've been going to Universal since it first opened, and I became a pass holder in 2006. And despite the fact that I have lived in Florida, Colorado, back to Florida, now in Texas, I kept my annual pass for that entire time. So this is my 13th year being a Universal annual pass holder. I'm going to give you my top 5 tips for planning your vacation, and then we'll get into some questions. So step number 1 of planning a trip to Universal Orlando is choosing how many days you want to visit and which parks you want to visit. They do run specials if you're a Florida resident, but if you're traveling in out of state like myself, it's a slightly higher price. It looks like currently right now you're looking at a 1-day ticket for Universal Studios at $115, same for Islands of Adventure, and about $80 for Volcano Bay, although Volcano Bay does have, I don't want to call it surge pricing because that's Uber, but I think it does vary depending on the day of the week that you're there. And then they always have special deals going where if you go for this many days, you'll get this many days free, or if you go this many days, you get a discount. Just like all the theme parks do, they're trying to encourage you to stay longer in order to spend more money in the parks, but they'll give you a discount on the tickets. That said, with the addition of the Hogwarts Express, I do think you need a 2-park pass at the very least, because you're going to want to take the train between Islands of Adventure to Universal Studios, both directions, and in order to take the train, you have to have a 2-park pass. Yes, that was genius on their parts to make sure you had to buy a 2-park pass, but it's one of my absolute favorite experiences at the parks. So highly recommend getting the 2-park pass and hopping back and forth between the parks. Now I will say, if you're going to be there for an extended stay, I still recommend the annual pass. Like I said, I'm a Texas resident now, but we know every single year, at least currently, that we will go back for Halloween Horror Nights in the fall. So we absolutely use our passes during that trip. And then if we go back to visit my family or friends in Florida earlier in the year, then we have a Universal pass to hop over the parks, and it almost always gives us an excuse to go back. So when it comes to annual passes, of course, there are different options there as well. I have been a preferred annual pass holder since 2006, but Mike, my fiance, is a power pass. So he has less benefits than I do, but we're always together when we go to the parks. So I'm getting the free parking, I'm getting the food discounts, and the only other downside to his pass is that there are blackout dates, and they're always during times we wouldn't want to be there anyway, like spring break, middle of summer, and Christmas. So it works out just fine for us, for me to have the preferred pass and him have the power pass. Now there is a pass that's higher than mine, but since I'm out of state, I really don't get the benefit of that one, so I just stick with preferred. So if you are going to get an annual pass, make sure you research what packages they are currently offering for each pass and make the decision for which one works best for your needs. Step number 2 is deciding if you're going to stay on or off property. And I know I had some questions about the various resorts that I'll get to later, so I won't go super in depth into each resort, but I will say that I highly recommend staying on property when you visit Universal. The hotels might have improved in recent years. I've stayed on property every trip in recent years because the selection wasn't great right around Universal back then. The quality of experience of staying on property is totally worth it at Universal. If you watch my vlogs, then you know that Cabana Bay is our absolute favorite. It's extremely affordable for the most part of the year. And then we also fell in love with Sapphire Falls. So those are the two that we typically stay at. And then I have also stayed at Royal Pacific, but it was a long time ago. It was before those other two resorts existed. So it was a long time ago. It was almost a decade ago. So when you're choosing your resort, and I believe there are 6 now, they're working on the 7th one, you need to keep in mind how important express passes are for you, because only certain resorts come with the express passes, and you might be paying quite a bit to stay in those hotels. That's Hard Rock, that's Portofino, and Royal Pacific. Those are the 3 resorts that come with express passes as part of your hotel. The other resorts are more affordable, and that's Sapphire Falls, Cabana Bay, and Aventura. Those 3, currently, you do not get express passes with your stay, but you do get early access to Harry Potter, and they'll let you know if it's going to be at Islands or Universal. I think lately it's almost always been Diagon Alley, but they do switch it up sometimes. The other thing that I know people are usually curious about is transportation, getting from your resort to the parks. Sapphire and inadvertently Aventura, just because it's so close to Sapphire, Royal Pacific, Hard Rock, and Portofino, you have the water taxis, and they are fantastic. It's so nice to get on the water taxi after a long day at the parks and just take a leisurely boat ride back to your resort. Super convenient. With the exception of Halloween Horror Nights, I've never had to wait a few minutes to get on one. They're there waiting to pick you up. And then for Cabana and also Aventura, you have the option of taking a bus. I was iffy on staying at Cabana for the first time because of the buses, and I should not have been worried. They have so many buses running to Cabana that it's like clockwork. I can't think of a time, even during Halloween Horror Nights, where I've waited more than a couple minutes for a bus, and those couple minutes were probably because the guy said, hey, I've got another bus right behind it. If you want to wait, you don't have to stand. It's super efficient, fantastic, a quick drive. The only catch to staying at the resorts is that you have to pay for parking if you have a car. And as an annual pass holder who gets free parking at the garages, this always rubs me the wrong way. So if you are staying off property and you have your car, if you have an annual pass, you'll get free parking at the garages, no problem. I know we just stayed at Sapphire in January, and it was $25 per day to park there once tax and everything came into it. So that hurts. I cannot lie about that. That is the one downside to it. In fact, in our fall trip this past year, we didn't even get a rental car. We just Ubered because we didn't want to have to eat that cost of having a rental car parked for that entire week and all of that money toward parking. The other major difference about staying on one of the water taxi hotels versus Cabana is that the water taxi hotels have their own security checkpoints before you get on the water taxi. So you get dropped off right at City Walk. You don't have to go through the main security terminal that's in the hub of the parking garages, whereas Cabana, the bus drops you off at that hub, you go up an escalator, and then you're there at security. So number 3, decide whether or not you want express. Obviously, if you're staying at one of the resorts that offers express, you're already set. But if you're like me, staying at Cabana or Sapphire, then you need to decide whether you want to invest that extra money into express passes. For this, I'll just say that out of my 13 years being an annual pass holder, the only time I have ever invested in express passes was for Halloween Horror Nights. I have never once paid for having an express pass at regular Universal. Now, obviously I do avoid the huge peak times at the parks, so I don't go during spring break, Christmas, or summer, as I already said. In this last trip that we went on in January, we were there on Martin Luther King Jr. Day weekend, which is a mouthful, and the parks were packed. The parks were super busy. But the one thing I will say for Universal is that the busier they are, the more efficient they run things. So it is 100% possible to visit the parks, especially if you have multiple days, and get to see everything you want to see. Now, if you only have one day, that might be worth considering getting the express just to make sure you can see everything. But I'm gonna give you my strategy for hitting the parks, and you might not need it after listening to that. The other reminder is that Universal is fantastic about single rider lines. Almost every ride at Universal has a single rider option, and you don't have to go in by yourself. You can go in with your party and stand in the single rider line. The only catch is that you might, and most likely, will be separated. Now, majority of the time, I end up in the same car. Say Mike and I do single riders. Majority of the time, he ends up in the front row, I ended up in the row right behind him. And it's fine, we're still on the ride together. You don't talk during rides anyway, right? You're enjoying the ride. So I have never had a problem doing single riders. We live by it. That January trip that I linked, that was almost all single riders all day long. And I think you'll be shocked by how many times you end up getting to sit near the people you're with. Worst case scenario, you're usually like one train behind, 2 trains behind. You're not going to be waiting for 30 minutes for your other person to get off the ride. Can't stress enough, if you do single riders, you have to understand that you could get separated. Don't be that person that gets up to the front and be like, but I wanted to ride with them. Don't do that. So for number 4, I am going to give you my best strategy for hitting the parks during a busy time. So the nice thing about visiting during a busy time is that 1, yes, they're going to be running more efficiently, like I said, but 2, the park hours are going to be later. They're going to open early, they're going to close late. You get a lot of time on those days. One day, many years ago now, probably 6 years ago or so, I tackled Universal during spring break. Now, I was living in the area, not something I would normally do, but people were visiting from out of town, so I went to the parks on spring break. This is the method we used, and we got to ride everything multiple times. So first off, get there as close to park opening as you can. Or even better, get there before the park opens and be waiting to go inside. I'm not a morning person. I haven't personally done that, but I have gotten there super close to just after the gates opened in order to start my day without the hordes of people. For this particular example, I'm going to use Islands of Adventure. So for Islands of Adventure, we went straight to the Hulk. That's one of the first rides people see. It gets really busy as the day goes on. So we went straight to the Hulk, got that out of the way, went to Spider-Man, got that out of the way, started going around the circle and just hitting as much as we could until the lines formed. Once the lines started getting too long for our liking, which was about when we hit Wizarding World of Harry Potter, we took a nice leisurely break. We strolled through Harry Potter, we took our time, and then went out to City Walk and grabbed lunch. At that point, it's a perfect time to eat in City Walk, enjoy, or go back to your resort and hang out at the pool, have a nap, whatever you need to do to recharge in that middle part of the day that's super hot anyway. It's fantastic to relax at your resort, recharge, and then go back out and hit the parks. Mike and I did this in May of last year on that trip. We started with Universal. We did everything we wanted to do at Universal Studios. We grabbed some bread box for lunch, got some voodoo donuts, caught the boat back to Sapphire. Mike took a nap at Sapphire, I relaxed. Then we went back out probably around 5 o'clock when the sun was starting to drop, it wasn't as hot, and enjoyed the whole rest of the evening at Islands of Adventure from like 5 to 10. It was perfect. So I highly recommend early morning until the crowds are intolerable, afternoon break, come back in the evening and stay until closing. So number 5, the last thing I want to suggest when it comes to planning your Universal Orlando trip is to take advantage of City Walk. City Walk has gone through a huge change over the past few years. They have switched out almost every restaurant that's in there, and have really revitalized it into a place away from nightlife, club life, into a lot more dining options. And there are a ton of great food options as far as theme park food goes. If you're outside of the theme park world, not 5-star dining, but as far as coming out of a theme park, not just having to eat a theme park burger every single day, having options for sushi or the chocolate factory, voodoo donut, bread box, there are so many delicious food options in that area. So like I said, if you have a break, you can leave the park, they'll let you back in, relax your feet for a little bit, get out of the crowds, get a sun break if you are there in the middle of the hot part of the year, which is pretty much all of the year in Florida, and just relax and enjoy your vacation sampling some of the City Walk foods. Now, as far as I know, none of the City Walk restaurants take advanced reservations. However, there are so many options at City Walk at this point that unless you're dead set on a certain restaurant, you can probably walk into one of them at any given time. The Toothsome Chocolate Factory is extremely popular, so that one might be your longest wait, but I highly recommend Cowfish and Margaritaville as two of my favorites. Okay guys, so those were my top 5 tips. I hope that helped you out. And now I'm gonna go into the questions that you sent me on Twitter and Instagram, but to watch that, you're gonna have to wait for part 2 coming next week. So I'll see you guys then. Bye.